say, I agree with this, you know, or to explicitly say, can you please wrap up what you're saying? You know, that's what we want to do. But I was saying, finish one thing before moving on to the next. That's really important about decision making too. If you're discussing a proposal or decision, it's really important to be focused on that decision before trying to make a different decision. And sometimes it's useful to even be something that feels like it's one decision. There's actually like 5 decisions that are caught up in that thing, and it can be really useful to try and pull those apart, so you're not talking about like those 5 different things all at the same time.
So that during that point in time, people are raising their hands and whatnot.
Yeah.
Because I remember hearing something about breaking off into discussion groups and coming back. Is that point in time?
It depends on what you want to do. There's definitely ways that if it's a really large group, you can actually break people up into smaller groups. I usually recommend groups of 5 or 6 people, because when you're in a group of 5 or 6 people, there's actually an opportunity for everyone to speak. And you can ask people to discuss a decision together, and then they can basically select someone who's a delegate who's going to present to the rest of the group. This is what we discussed in our group. This is what we think about this issue. I mean, I don't think that format, though, is really very necessary unless you're in a meeting with more than 50 people.
So for our setup with like 30 or so people,
I think it might be unnecessarily complicated, but it definitely, there are times when it's really useful to break up into smaller groups, right? If you really want to get people to discuss something in depth. Because the fact of the matter is, you're in a meeting with 20 or 30 people for an hour, right? 20 people in that meeting, if you divide up all the time evenly, 3 minutes per person to speak, right? And of course it's not going to happen that way. There's going to be about 5 or 6 people who speak for much longer, and there's going to be like 10 or 15 people who don't speak at all. So small groups can be a way to make sure that more people get a chance to talk.
Yeah. And I like your thing about committees. Maybe at the General Assembly, you can decide, okay, who wants to be kitchen, who wants to be builder, who wants to be logistics, media, blah, blah, blah. Volunteer, off you go, next meeting, report back to us.
Yeah, because that way, part of this, I mean, that's called delegation, right? Which basically means assigning people, like the bigger group, assigning people who are going to be responsible for a certain thing, right? Whether that's the kitchen, whether that's about dismantling something. And then those people, they're being empowered by the group to do that work. And they can come back to the group and they can report about what they're doing. But then it's not like every single decision has to be made in the huge group. But they can check back in, right? They have an official role, an official way they can check back in. So most of the occupies have working groups, or committees, whatever they call them. And most of the occupies, as a part of their agenda, have a report back time from the working groups. And some occupies have up to 30 working groups. That include everything from kitchen, security, first aid, logistics, which is about like where certain things are going to be, what the plan is, research, media. There's like so many different things. I don't know. I'm not suggesting Occupy Sudbury needs 30 working groups, but I think 3 might be a good start. I mean, it depends on how many people you have and how much energy and time you have too, right? Okay. So I'm going to shift now into talking about roles in meetings and what a few of the most helpful ones are. Is it okay now for me to move over into that topic? Okay. Okay. So I'm going to start by talking about facilitators, because I think facilitation is one of the most important roles in a meeting. Oh, and by the way, if you look on the back side of the piece of paper that has this crazy ass flowchart on it, there's a list of roles on the left-hand side, and I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I'm going to talk about most of them. But it kind of sums them up right there. Okay. So, facilitator. The word facilitate means to make easy, which means facilitating hearing and communicating, making it easier for people to hear and communicate with each other. And the point of a facilitator is to try and clarify issues, to focus the discussion, to keep bringing the group back to talking about the topic at hand, and to prioritize, to help the group prioritize, this is the thing that we need to talk about right now. And to try and bring in everybody's viewpoints, even the people who disagree with a certain thing, right? So to actually highlight when there is a disagreement so that we can actually talk about what that disagreement is and what those disagreements are. It's important for a facilitator to really try and have awareness about who's in the room. And by that I mean the different genders of people who are in the room, the different races of people who are in the room, the different class experiences of people who are in the room, the people who are really comfortable speaking in the room and the people who are not really comfortable speaking. And to try and bring in, right, try and create a space where more people feel comfortable, and the people who feel most comfortable speaking maybe can step back a little bit and not feel like they have to be in charge of it. Another part of being a facilitator is trying to listen really carefully for when there is some agreement. When it actually seems like people in the room are coming to a place where there is a general agreement, and then being able to say, it sounds to me like people are saying this. It sounds to me like people are feeling engaged here. Can we come to consensus? So it's actually about listening really carefully to where people are at. Yeah. And moderator meaning what? Okay. I'll talk. What I'm gonna suggest is that it's good to have two facilitators in a meeting. And basically, two facilitators. One facilitator is actually not so. Okay. One facilitator is doing something called taking stack, which means looking around, seeing who wants to talk, who has their hand up. That person is keeping careful track. Okay, Christy has her hand up. She wants to talk. I'm going to keep a list, right? I'm going to know the exact order of who's going to speak. That's their only job. That's that facilitator's job. They're the stack taker. The other facilitator is not actually paying attention to who has their hand up. They're listening to the conversation, and they're trying to make sure the conversation stays focused and that people are on point about the decision they need to make together, and then it's trying to help people move in that direction. And if people are really quiet, is maybe even saying, "You haven't said anything, Jason," which is probably something that happens to you frequently. Do you have a strong opinion? Are you concerned about this? Something like that. So actually, that might be a way to resolve the moderator facilitator question. Of actually have two people who are working together, but with kind of different sorts of attention in the meeting. Does that address your question?
Well, my understanding of the moderator, as we've been using it, is the person who would say, try to keep things civil.
Okay.
Some people have been talking.
Wrap it up. Yeah. That one of the two facilitators could take on that role, right? You could call one of these people a facilitator and one of them a moderator, right? And make sure that there's always a team working together. There's actually going to be a couple other roles I'm going to talk about that might bring in some of those kinds of tasks too. But basically what I'm getting at is the bottom line responsibility of people who are facilitating a meeting is making sure the meeting runs well. Making sure that the people who are together in that room are communicating. Not screaming at each other, not being totally shut down, but actually listening and talking to one another and moving forward in the agenda. And like I mentioned before when I was talking about the sample agenda, it's good for the facilitators at the end of a meeting, when you decide when's the next meeting, you also decide who's going to facilitate that meeting. And those facilitators, part of their responsibility is to come to that meeting with the plan.